Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well? So we're here today to stimulate thinking and stimulate debate and challenge thinking about crises and issues in the world. Let's not forget at all that these crises are not faceless. Behind every child, behind every community, behind every figure, there's always a person that probably you haven't met, but we in the field have met. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about my story, having worked in the field, the story of my country, Lebanon. I have worked in the fields of communications with World Vision for the last 13 years, and I have met hundreds of refugees. I've listened to their stories. I've met with them, their families, their children. I'm still in contact with many of them up till today. There's one thing all refugees have in common. It's their look. It's not the look of fear, or it's not the look of need. It's actually the look of despair. They're desperate. One time, I was meeting in a family in a makeshift tent in the Bekaa Valley, and there was a boy. And like a lot of boys his age, 9-year-old Abdul Rahman was imitating sounds. It wasn't any sound. It was actually the sounds of rockets. He started by doing like a boom, and then followed by a whistling sound, and then he replicated in a very childish way the sounds of an explosion. And he kept like in between the two distinct voices, few seconds to just be accurate about how he's imitating that sound. And it only took few seconds and few sounds from a child's mouth to bring back all the memories I have lived when I was a child his age back in Lebanon. That was during the 80s, during the civil war in Lebanon. I lived the war. I've hidden in a shelter. We call it Malja in Arabic, for those Arabic speakers here. As a Lebanese citizen who was born in the war and lived the war, I could not but just hold Abdul Rahman's hand and tell him that he had to be strong for his sisters and brothers. They need you, I told him. These sounds just brought back all the memories that I had piled up from my childhood, from the days of war in Lebanon. And Abdul Rahman actually explained to me the different sounds between a rocket launcher, a helicopter, and a MiG plane. He actually told me, if you hear a helicopter, just run for your life. If you hear a MiG plane, you should be happy in a way, because it already hit, it's on her way out. But that also means that people have died. I really can't imagine how a child could master the jargon and the vocabulary of war. Will he remember running for his life as a child? I don't know. Will he remember these sounds when he grows up? I don't know. I know I did as a child. And up till today, I remember them as if they were yesterday. Because when I was a child and I was hiding in that warehouse, our 4-story building was hit twice by bombs. I could still smell the fear of my mother's as she gathered us under her wing when the bombs were happening. I could never, that memory haunted me for nights and years. At that time, there were no child-friendly spaces, and there were no, what we call now, the psychosocial support for children. Just we had to live with it. So we keep telling stories about our work. And my co-panelist, Arwa, will probably talk a lot about stories from inside Syria even. We're always asked as communications working with media, or probably telling the stories directly to the media, we're asked to tell compelling stories, right? We need to say what's happening in a very compelling way. So we talk about probably sufferings, pain, or sometimes just the other side of the spectrum, We talk about positive things. You know, we talk about refugees making it to the Olympics, refugees opening their own businesses, their own shops, you know, making it through, surviving. But what happens in between those two spectrums, you know? The overall affected population, people just like me and you who have just gone through the horrific fact of fleeing a country and seeking refuge in another country. You know, what about the stories of girls who have difficulties during their menstruation period? They have to work for like 10 hours a day in the field without girlish breaks. What about the story of a father talking to him once? He just received the cash assistance from World Vision, and he rushed to buy all the basic needs, you know, for his children, like food, water, paying the rent. But actually talking for him for a few minutes, what he actually really wanted was to bring some delights to his child and buy him a lollipop. What about Ziyad and Iyad, a 10-year-old twin I have met, who just before they fled Syria, they buried marble balls, the marble balls children play with, next to their house in Syria because they were sure that once they go back to Syria, they will not find that house because it will be destroyed. What about all the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds who I have met in World Vision centers? Once they come into our educational center, they actually don't recognize their names. They don't have this identification, this individualism in their names. They don't answer their names because they are brought up in makeshift tents and unorganized settlements. And believe me, you don't have to be a psychologist to read this in their drawings. What about those stories? Those are the stories in between the two spectrums. It's been already 7 years into this crisis, and soon we're entering the 8th year to the war inside Syria. I never imagined that I will be seeing the same faces again over 8 years. You know, I've seen hair graying. I see wrinkles on eyes, on people's face I have met 7 years ago. I have seen actually the skin of children thickening from child labor. There's not a single area in Lebanon that has not been affected by the Syrian refugee crisis in Lebanon. Communications people like myself are often caught between a rock and a hard spot. You know, we need to tell that early child marriage story, the child labor story, and we need to tell, you know, the success stories. But our heart actually goes to every single people that we meet. Every person counts for us. The truth is that many Lebanese brag about how resilient we are, right? We talk about how we survived the waves of violence and conflicts that hit our country. But actually, we have become so jaded, and we have turned a blind side to the misery surrounding us in our own country. The truth is that I'm still a believer that little acts of kindness and compassion still counts in our day and age. The truth is, it's very easy to convince ourselves that there is nothing we can do. It's very easy. This is the simplest thing we can believe in, but actually there is. The mere fact that thinking about refugees would help them, praying for them, still donating even after all these years, help. The truth is, no matter how you look at this crisis, there's a whole generation of children, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers that are affected. And this will have long-term impact not only on them, but on the future of their country. The truth is that NGOs are doing their best to help refugees. But short of finding any solution, every bit we can do counts. Thank you.